question and answer portion, and that's a time where we can ask for you to open your mics or open your camera. Just to be organized, we'll just ask if you can ask your questions through the chat, or you can raise your hand through the reactions. Just raise your hand there, and then we will try our best to call you so that you can ask your question. This will be a recorded event as well, and we will be able to share the recording a day after the event. So without further ado, I will pass it on to our moderator, Chantal, and also to our wonderful panelists here right now.
Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us. You are here for KPU's Career Development Center's industry panel sessions, and today it's all about criminology. So welcome to that. And before we get started, I'm just going to go ahead and acknowledge this wonderful place that we live and work. So I'd like to take this moment to state that we do work, study, and live in a region south of the Fraser River, which overlaps with the unceded traditional and ancestral lands of the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katsi, Semiahmoo, Tawasin, Kikite, and Coquitlam peoples. Here's what we'll be covering today. Michelle, of course, already covered housekeeping. A reminder that this is recorded and it will be uploaded in about a day or so. We're going to start by introducing the panelists, and each of them will give us a little bio of themselves, and then we will ask them some questions, which is why we're all here. And then we'll open it up at the end for any questions that you, students or alumni, might have for the panelists today, and then we will wrap it up. As you know, of course, the Career Development Center is hosting these industry panel sessions, and the purpose for that is for all of you to get an inside look into an industry. So today it's all about criminology, and I suspect that many of the students that are here today are criminology students, or at least thinking about declaring criminology as their major. But I do hope that there are other students here today from other fields, social sciences, IT, whatever it might be, because criminology really does encompass quite a vast field, from policing to social justice to cybercrime. So hopefully there's a few of you here today that are from other programs and are looking to explore possibilities. And hopefully you'll find some answers here today. So we do have some panelists with us today, luckily, and thank you all to the panelists. We have Natalie Barnes, who is the Executive Director of the Justice Services Branch within the Ministry of the Attorney General. Then we have Rod Johnston, who's a Correctional Supervisor with BC Corrections. We have Renee Dundas, his colleague, a Correctional Supervisor as well at BC Corrections. And then we have Constable Binita Cieslar from the RCMP. So I'll go ahead and ask each of you to maybe introduce yourselves to the attendees today, and perhaps we'll just go ahead and start with you, Natalie.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Natalie Barnes, and I'm coming to you today from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, today known as the Esquimalt and Songhees Nations. It's my pleasure to be here. I have been in my position as the Executive Director of Policy and Legislation in the Ministry of Attorney General since July of last year, so about 10 months. And prior to that, I spent 17 years as a lawyer in the Legal Services Branch, Ministry of Attorney General. And prior to that, I went to law school at UVic, and I studied criminology at Simon Fraser a long time ago, 1996 to 2000. So very pleased to meet everybody and to be here. Thanks very much for having me. I don't know if you want any more of a bio than that, or if that's good there, Chantal.
That's perfect, Natalie. Thanks so much for that. Yeah. Okay, great. And why don't we take it over to Rod. Rod, why don't you introduce yourself to the attendees today?
Hi, my name is Rod Johnston. I'm a recruiter with BC Corrections, or a Correctional Supervisor. I've been with the branch for 33 years, or just finishing my 33 years. So I've seen a lot of changes through the branch and through corrections and what we've done I've been in the recruitment position probably for about the last 6 years, but I was also into it previously for a few years. I've been an instructor. I've been an ERT member for 20 plus years. I've worked in probably every area of the center. Most of my career is spent in remand. However, I have worked with sentenced offenders as well. So, and I'm very happy to be here to sort of talk to you about my experiences and BC Correction.
Thank you, Rod. You mentioned remand. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so basically, within BC Corrections, we house two different types of offenders. We house sentence offenders. So in provincial, it's anybody serving 2 years less a day. However, we do house remanded offenders, which are those offenders that are waiting to appear in front of a judge or to go to court. So they may be remanded into custody for a multitude of different reasons, at which time they're put into our care and custody until they reach the court system, or there's some sort of final ending to their charges. So whether it be sentenced or released from custody or into the community, that for one reason or another that they've been placed into remand custody. So those are anybody waiting to go to court, and those are offenders that could be in a couple days to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years at times, depending on the courts, right? So, like I said, it varies on the length that they could be remanded into custody.
Excellent. Thank you, Rod, for that clarification for the layman and myself. Okay, Renee, how about over to you?
Sorry, Renee, we'll just have to get you to unmute, please. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, my name is Renee Dundas, and I am a recruiter for BC Corrections. I work with Mr. Johnston, and I've been in for 14 years, and I worked 10 of those years out of Alouette Correctional Center for Women, the Women's Center. And there we have secure and medium custody. And for the last 4 years, I've been in recruiting. And when I was in the center, I was working in all different areas of the center as a supervisor and as a correctional officer.
Great. Thank you, Renee. I'm pretty sure I've seen you present before. Would this have been something you've done before, perhaps for Work BC or something along those lines?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, then I have for sure. Great to see you again. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we will take it over to Binita.
Hi, everyone. I'm Constable Cieslar. I'm a member of the RCMP E-Division recruiting team. I've been a police officer for 16 years. My first post was in Coquitlam RCMP, where I did general duty and domestic violence unit, and then a little bit of the youth section. I transferred into Surrey RCMP in about 2011, 2012, actually. There I did Surrey street crime unit, so we did search warrants for drug houses. I did youth section as well as general duty on the Wally Strip. Now I'm in the recruiting section, and I travel around BC and the Yukon, and I recruit for policing.
Thank you, Binita. Constable Cieslar. That is quite a resume. Wow, I have to say. All right, thank you all very much for those well thought out bios, most appreciated. And what we're going to do now is we're going to hop straight into the questions. And so the way that we've put this together is we have 2 rounds of questions where each panelist will answer the question, and then we have one final question that we put to all panelists for their overall view of their role. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we're going to start with Rod. Rod, during your 33 years with BC Corrections, 33 years, you've held a variety of roles, including correctional officer, supervisor, and a trainer for new recruits. What, if anything, has changed about the people applying to work with BC Corrections?
Thank you for that question. Again, 33 years, man, it sounds like such a long time, and it flew by, first of all. Like I say, it just seems like it wasn't that long that I started as a brand new recruit. I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen over the years is that we're getting our applicants with a much more diverse work background. When I first started, it typically, and my own path and journey to where I am today was that I started in corrections, wanting to go into law enforcement, sort of using it as a stepping stone. So a lot of people that were applying were sort of coming from that criminology, security sort of background, maybe a military background. What we're seeing now is a much more diverse background. I can tell you over the years that I've been recruiting that we've seen people with PhDs, we've seen people with master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, we've seen people come from a variety of different sectors, dentists, people that were dentists in other countries coming over here, people sort of in the medical field, nurses join corrections, people that are coming from trades coming in, joining corrections, as well as people sort of from the banking industry, all coming in, like I say, such a much more diverse background, as well as our officer population is much more diverse in that we're seeing people that are sort of joining corrections and looking for, maybe a second or third career. So that is something when I started that you didn't see that, right? That you saw, a lot of people coming in sort of looking for a career down the road, where now we're seeing people that are looking to corrections as a second or third career and a change. They're looking to do something different in their life, as well as the generations that we're seeing, people that are applying in their early 20s, mid 30s, mid 40s, mid 50s, even people that have retired after long careers doing something else, that they've applied and come to BC Corrections to sort of start that second career in their 60s. So it's like I say, it's no longer sort of a one sort of demographic that we're seeing. We're seeing a very vast, bigger demographic and a much vaster and more diverse population of officers that are sort of coming in and making a career out of it. And that, as recruiters, that's sort of what I like to tell people is, that you can make a career out of this and you can be here for a long time. Like I say, it's 33 years and it's been a fantastic 33 years for me. And we're starting to see a lot more people coming from other jobs that maybe weren't quite as stable, and they're starting to think about, working in corrections as a career, as opposed to, we're still going to get some people that come in and they're looking for it for life experience to move on to something else. But I think we're starting to see a lot more people that are coming in and wanting to stick around for a longer time, or they're just looking for a change in their life. So that's sort of probably the biggest thing that I've seen over my 30 some odd years.
Rod, that is really interesting to hear. And I'm pretty sure if I was to put that question to other recruiters in other industries, it would be a very similar response, in that it very much falls in line with what we tell students here at KPU, that career paths are far from linear. And I suspect, right, that a lot of the people that are applying now would never have necessarily thought that they would be a correction officer in their future back, when they maybe first graduated from university or started in a different career. You just don't know.
Yeah, and we get that a lot, like especially when we do our in-person job fairs. You get a lot of people simply because there's not a lot known about what we do. So there's always a lot of questions. And, when I start talking to applicants that haven't really thought about it, then you ask them why, and they, I don't know if I'm, strong enough or this or that. And, we try to dispel the myths that we see on TV, what you see on TV and the movie, and that, well, that's really not what we do. It's probably 180 degrees from what we do. So when they realize, that some of the skills and traits that, and I know it's part of another question I mean, when they realize that they probably have a lot of skills and traits to be able to do the work that we do, and then they start, because there are a lot that we talk to that have thought about it, but they didn't think they'd be able to do the work. And it's not until they actually talk to somebody and find out exactly what it is, because again, like I say, the movies and Hollywood is sort of what we know of corrections. And when we sort of dispel those myths and rumors, then we see a lot of people, you sort of see their eyes open up and their brains start thinking, oh, okay. And then we're starting, like I say, we're starting to see some of them apply.
Right. Well, your response to this, Rod, just kind of confirms for us the importance of people that are in career research to reach out to people that are actually doing those jobs. Like as a career
Yeah.
coach, I could talk about strategy till I'm
Yeah.
blue in the face, but I cannot tell you the inner workings of an industry.
Yeah.
Only people who are in it can do that. So
Yeah. Exactly. And one of the things and Renee, one of the things that I tell everybody, I said, you know, you got to do your due diligence. It's a career. So it's like any career, you've got to do your research. I always say you want to go into this type of career with your eyes wide open. And, you know, you got to think about the ifs, ands, and buts, you know, about all the you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you really do, you want to reach out, you want to talk to people that are in the industry so you completely understand about what we do. Because it is certainly a different type of career. And it's not one that a lot of people think about. But again, it's a very rewarding. If it wasn't rewarding, I wouldn't be there for 33 years.
exactly. Thank you so much, Rod.
Welcome.
Okay, over to Natalie. Natalie, can you speak a little to your transition from practicing law with the BC government to being Executive Director of the Ministry of Attorney General's Policy and Legislation Division? How did that particular career shift occur?
Thanks. Well, I mean, the answer, there's kind of the short answer and the long answer. The short answer is that I was recruited into that position by the person who was currently in it, and he was being promoted, and we had been working together for about 2 years, as I was the advising solicitor on a number of the projects that division was taking forward, and so he recruited me into it. But I mean, I think that the longer answer is that I accumulated experience in as many different areas as I possibly could over the 17 years that I was practicing law prior to this current position. So I took every opportunity that came at me. And when I was asked to, for instance, I worked on the legalization of cannabis, so the province's licensing scheme. I worked on the ICBC enhanced care shift. I worked on all kinds of, basically anything that came my way that was different or interesting or high profile. I volunteered to work on it, and that was really the key to being successful in the competition for this position, because the Policy and Legislation Division is responsible for about 120 provincial statutes in every area that you can think of, from the sort of black letter law areas like wills and estates, representation agreements, and that kind of thing, adult guardianship, all the way through the COVID-19 response legislation was all done out of that shop as well. There's such a huge variety. And so having had that experience of working on various legal subject matters was the key to that transition into being a successful candidate. And I think that the other thing that was hugely important is that our division does law reform in aid of improving access to justice. And I had a lot of different roles in the justice sector and in the justice system prior to this job. So even though I was always practicing law, it was kind of in different ways. Like sometimes I was a participant in court processes as a litigator. Sometimes I was a Crown Counsel for a little while, so I was prosecuting in provincial court. I prosecuted provincial offenses as well as criminal offenses. So I was able to take that perspective as a user of the criminal justice system and of the civil justice system and bring that to bear on the job in this division. And I think those are sort of the key things that set me up so that when I was recruited into the role, I was ready to compete for it and get it.
Wow, that's great, Natalie. Yeah, so I'm hearing two parts to that. So the first one was your short answer, and your short answer being the person that was in the role had really kind of recruited you for it to replace him. And I mean, what a vote of confidence that is, right? But then also the fact that you have someone who clearly saw those actions on your part, which leads me to the second part, which was your longer answer. Um, which, and I say this to students all the time, the importance of being where you are, right? So being where you are and paying attention to what's going on around you, and who is what, and how you can connect and learn as much as you can where you are, which will then bring you to the next step and bring you to the next step. So I love it. I love hearing that, because it certainly does speak to the way that we coach here at KPU, where we encourage students when they do get it, or even long before they get out into the their career, that they be where they are, and they get to know as much as they can about themselves and about the position and about who they're working with. And that helps in itself in making those natural progressions through one's career. So that's a really great response. So thank you very much for that, Natalie.
Can I just add one thing? I'm sorry, I should have put
Please
a little
do.
more emphasis on this. And I think that the other piece of emphasis is that I really cultivated those relationships so that when it was time for this individual to think about his succession planning, I was right at the top of his mind, because I worked to develop that relationship, and develop relationships with all of the people that I worked with in the course of my legal practice career. Um, and I think that's a lot of it as well. It's like, yes, I did have the knowledge and I had the experience, but I wouldn't have got the foot in the door if not for the fact that I had developed this relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, be where you are by cultivating those relationships that are around you. If I dare say the word networking, right? But it's about making those connections. It's about having people know who you are and what you're capable of, or what you're capable of at least trying trying to do. Right? So kind of putting yourself out there. If your comfort zone is here, making sure that you're placed just outside of that comfort zone. But the importance of cultivating those relationships, we couldn't agree more here at KPU. Natalie, thank you for confirming that for our students today as well. Next up, Binita. Binita, you've witnessed a lot of tragedy in your role as an RCMP constable, particularly in your previous role where you responded to calls ranging from domestic disturbances and assaults to homicides. What advice would you give to new hires around the importance of self-care? Is there programming in place to assist with the health and wellness of RCMP staff?
I think policing in general has changed a lot in mental health. But due to the files that we attend, there are a lot of events that we need help with on a regular basis. For the RCMP in particular, we are covered. We have great medical and dental coverage, all of that stuff. But mental health coverage is amazing. So we have up to 6 psychologist visits a year that we can go to anytime. On top of that, if the psychologist feels that you need more sessions, they would approve it. Our medical section oversees that. In addition to that, if there's a critical incident, so say you attended a file, there was a homicide involved, a lot of your watchmates were affected as well. So there's 7 people at the file together. We call that a critical incident. And the next day, the RCMP detachment that you're working for will bring in a psychologist to debrief you and your team, and we would talk about our roles on that particular day. And the importance of this is it happens the next day, so that everybody can get out those memories right away and start talking about it. Once we do that critical incident debrief, we can also touch base with the psychologist one-on-one. So the psychologist stays in the room, and whatever officers feel like they need to talk to that person privately, you can do that too. So great services available. We also have a program in place where we can talk to other police officers if needed. So there's certain police officers that are certified to talk to other members and take on issues and refer services when needed. So we have a lot in place right now for our mental health.
Great. Thank you, Binita. And I wonder if you can also speak a little bit to your own self-care. Are there any things that you practice on a regular basis that you could share with the group?
Yeah, so the biggest thing as a police officer is, especially for young people, you're get into this police force and you might not know exactly what it entails. You see it on TV and it's exciting and all of that, but you don't see like the things that break down. So file after file, working with long hours and not enough resourcing sometimes. And that's police forces across the board. Days where you're going to work 12 hours and then have to stay at 6 a.m. for a domestic violence file that you have to write up and submit a report to Crown Counsel. So long days, long hours. The things that I did when I first became a member were different from what I do now. So before kids, obviously, I exercised. I spent time with my friends and I did a lot of sports. Now that I have kids, it's a little bit different. So my decompressing is also working out still, but a lot of alone time. Because I have the kids now, I find that my self care routine has changed dramatically since when I first became a member. So working out, obviously, that's part of my job. I have to be physically fit, but also taking the time to just have alone time. So without your spouse and without your kids, just decompressing. My role right now as a recruiter is a lot different than my general duty roles or my domestic violence roles. So my job has changed a lot as well. So it just depends on the job you're in and your self care routine, depending on where you are in life as well.
Great. Thank you for that, Benita. I can confirm as a career coach with a husband and kids, I too
Yeah.
like to have some self-care, independence, alone time.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, thank you so much for that, Benita. And again, it really is so important for students that are out there listening right now or alumni. If you're thinking of looking at the RCMP as a career or policing in general, it's so crucial that you have these conversations with people that are doing them or that have done them so that you do get the nitty gritty, right? You don't get the Hollywood version. You talk to someone that chances are they're going to be very, very honest with you about what the day to day looks like. So, Benita, thank you so much for coming here today and sharing that with us. Okay, next up we have Renee. So, Renee, how has your perception of working in corrections differed from your actual experience? Speaking of, right, speaking of going directly to the source to find out about the inner workings, how has your perception changed since you started working there?
Well, I was like most people where I thought corrections was kind of like what I saw on TV and movies. So for me, and it's really odd that I would have that perception having family members that were in corrections as well. But I never really talked to them about the job because to me it was something that I never saw myself doing. I never saw myself doing, didn't have any interest in finding out about it or anything. So when a friend of mine was actually what I was a stay-at-home mom. So I raised my kids. I did a lot of volunteer work with Girl Guides, Brownies, and coach softball and volunteered at the schools a lot. So I did a lot of volunteer work when my kids were growing up. And like I said, I was fortunate to be a stay-at-home mom at the time. So at 39 is when I decided to go back to work full time. And at that point, I never thought of corrections. A friend of mine happened to go for a tour of a correctional facility and started talking to me about it. And she said I should really check it out. It sounds like a really great career. So I went to the website and I looked at the job posting, what BC Corrections was looking for. And everything I was reading, I was like, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I started getting really excited about this. And so then I talked to people that were actually started talking to family members about their job, about what they did. And that's when I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. I think this is something I could really do. Because my perception was you needed to be strong, physically strong. You needed to be outgoing. You needed to be loud. Um, you needed to be a talker. So what I found out through the job, doing the job itself, was that I can still be quiet and soft spoken. Communicating is huge, very important in what we do. And So all that stuff about having to be strong, having to be loud, that's not what you need to do to be as a correctional officer. It's about patience, understanding, listening more than talking. It's about being able to hold people accountable for their behavior, confidence, having self-confidence. And so when before I got into corrections, I saw it as being something totally different than what it actually is. And the volunteer work that I did earlier really helped me develop the skills that I use daily as a correctional officer, which is like problem solving, conflict, things like that. So for me, my perception was completely different than what actually the work is itself.
Yeah, and I suspect it probably is for a lot of our viewers, right? A lot of the students that are here today, they probably do have perhaps, again, it goes back to what Rod and Binita mentioned earlier about the perceptions that we get from either social media or Hollywood or whatever it might be. Again, so incredibly important to hear it firsthand from people that are in the industry. Renee, you had mentioned that you had decided to return back into the labor market full time. Prior to having children, were you involved in something to do with BC Corrections or policing at all?
Nope. Nope.
So it
When I
was a
was young,
complete
I
transition.
wanted to be a police officer when I was young. I remember.
Okay.
Yeah, but other than that, no, I took my life took a little bit of a different path. I met my husband in high school. We had our children early. We chose to have them earlier in life. And so then when it came to, I actually worked in the film industry for 6 years before I got into corrections. That was a good job. It was a good job, but it wasn't a career for me. I didn't find it challenging or rewarding. The money was good. The money was a lot better than what I took quite a pay cut to get into corrections at the beginning. But yeah, for me, yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Renee.
Yeah.
So again, it's not linear, is it? That pathway. No, it is not a linear pathway. Thank you so much for that, Renee. Okay, so that was the end of round one. We're going to move into round two. And the first question for round two, we move over to Natalie. Natalie, for someone interested in studying law after their undergrad in criminology or another similar area of study, what activities or experiences would you suggest they pursue while completing their undergrad?
Okay, so I am not up to speed with what it takes to get into law school anymore. And so I'm going to just say that right at the outset. I applied to law school 23 years ago, 24 years ago. So I couldn't say what you need now. But what I can say is that the experiences and activities that I undertook in my undergraduate time that were helpful for me as a law student and as a lawyer were all over the map. So I'm a person with a disability, so I wasn't doing a lot of sports, and I had to conserve my energy. I still have to conserve my energy to put my effort into the most high value things. So for when I was in undergrad, that was my studying, and I had a part-time job at McDonald's, which honestly was one of the best experiences of my life in terms of my ability to prioritize, my ability to take direction, my ability to communicate in sort of intense situations where you get into these customer service kind of conflicts. And I practiced a lot of nonviolent communication skills in that job that I still use today as a supervisor of 23 people. So like, I don't think that there is one thing that you should do, one activity or one experience that you should pursue. I think you should pursue the things that you are capable of. I think you should pursue the things that interest you. I think that if you need to work or you have to take care of your kids while you're doing your undergrad, that's your makeup, and that is what is going to make you different from everybody else who is applying to law school, everybody else who's applying to be a lawyer, everybody else who is putting their shingle out as a lawyer and practicing law. or developing their career in some other way. All of those experiences made me who I am and brought me to where I am. So I feel like, a lot of times, like the advice is do a lot of volunteer work or do a lot of sports. And maybe you can't do that. And that's totally fine because the real job is you got to do what you got to do to get through your everyday. And then you need to sit back and think about what is it about me that makes me unique? What are those soft skills that I picked up doing my job working in McDonald's? Or what did I learn from being a disabled student? What did I learn from uh, being a big sister at that time? Or, all of those things I think are important. And if you're a single parent studying criminology, wow, you are organized. You are a multitasker. You know how to prioritize. You know how to resolve conflicts. You know how to do all of those soft skills. Parenting is like the biggest skill stretcher that I've gone through in my life. So I think that you should just do what you need to do or what you want to do, and everything will shake out for the best in the end. There isn't one path.
Thank you, Natalie. Yes, there's no cookie cutter approach. There's no cookie cutter approach, is there? First of all, as someone who's just identified as a person with a disability, I'm pretty sure that's very inspiring for any of our attendees today to know that about you, Natalie, as someone who's in such an incredibly high position. So thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, and it's funny because with the McDonald's thing, yeah, I gotta say, I've met so many people that poo-poo the idea of working at McDonald's, but it is it's first of all, they have incredible training for staff. They have really strong customer training for staff, and I think that the skills, as you mentioned, the skills that you learn at McDonald's or other similar places, that will carry you through, right? Those interpersonal skills will really stick with you as you move through your professional career. I mean, you said yourself you're still using those nonviolent conflict resolution tips and tricks that you got from McDonald's. So that's great to hear. But a variety, but within your own within your own capacity is what it sounds like you're saying here, Natalie. Trying things out, but not overdoing it. Doing what you can do, I guess, right at the end of the day. All right, thank you so much for that. Binita, over to you. While working in the youth section, where you promoted policing careers to secondary school students, what would you say was the most rewarding aspect of promoting a career with the RCMP to BC youth?
My role in youth section wasn't really recruiting, but obviously you're going to meet a lot of kids who are really inspired by policing. So have rooted their schooling, their physical activity towards a police-based career. And that could mean anything. That could mean corrections. That could mean sheriffs. You could do security. Like a lot of people start off doing security. And I just wanted to add, I worked at McDonald's as well, and I was a crew trainer. And honestly, it was the best stepping stone to be a police officer. I learned how to manage people. I learned how to work with people, and it was one of the best jobs I ever had. I worked there for 4 years. So I really hear a lot from young people now, like, I'd never work at McDonald's. And I actually hate hearing that, because if you're too good to work at McDonald's, we don't want you in a different career, because you should be able to work those stepping stone jobs in order to make the best version of yourself. Like, we're not better than these other people's careers. Some people do that for a full-time living and do a great job at it. So no career should be out of the picture, especially when you're young and starting out. So for young people, I think the most rewarding part was seeing them succeed. So meeting them when they are in grade 10 or 11. And then when they graduate, after they apply, they email us and let us know, like, hey, I applied and I worked on this, this, and this. Volunteer work is important for policing, but also having a part-time job. So for young people right now, we are finding that people are not taking initiative to be financially responsible, and working a part-time job. So going to school is great, but what else are you doing? Like, you need to be able to work a part-time job and show that you're fiscally responsible, because as a police officer, you will be trusted with large sums of money sometimes, and we have to be able to trust everybody we work with and as police officers. So financial independence is very important for a young person. So we're finding that when I was working in youth, finding that people really followed your advice and was like, oh, I did this, this, and this. I got that part-time job, and now I am going into corrections and maybe going into policing later on. Um, Criminal justice has so many different fields. In corrections, you could be a parole officer, or be a corrections officer as well. But in policing, we have different roles as well. So nothing is going to limit you. Everything is going to help you or be a stepping stone. So don't talk down about any jobs, I would say. And I find a lot of youth take that advice and work with it.
That is incredibly important advice, I think, to give to BC youth, and it's true. Unfortunately, the jobs like the McDonald's jobs and so forth, they do not get the proper recognition that they should have. The amount of transferable skills that it allows youth and employees overall to develop is uh, quite phenomenal, really. I do want to say, actually, I did forget to mention this a little bit early on. Obviously, this is not Constable Gumbuck.
No.
Unfortunately, Constable Gumbuck was sick today, and Binita has graciously, very last minute, accepted this invitation. So again, thank you to you, Binita, for stepping in today to this role. I do want to mention that. So thank you very much for that, Binita, as well.
High five on McDonald's, Binita.
Yeah.
That's great.
I just wanted to say before I turn off my mic, I do have to leave at 1 because I have another meeting. I didn't know about this panel, but if anybody has questions, I wrote in the messaging where our website is, but Michelle also has my email address, so please feel free to email me. I am a recruiter, so if you have specific questions about your education or anything like that, please email me and I'll get back to you.
So great. Thank you very much for that
No problem.
invitation. Okay, we're moving on to Renee. Renee, in a survey geared towards criminology alumni last year, previous students identified networking with prospective employers as an important component of an effective program. What tips would you provide to students around networking for those interested in pursuing or at least researching future opportunities with BC Corrections? That was a mouthful. Renee?
Well, and Mr. Johnston kind of touched on this as well. It's really, really important to know exactly what you're getting yourself into. So I highly recommend to everybody, if you know somebody working in corrections or somebody's relative or friend works in corrections, talk to them. Talk to them about the job and ask them what they do all day long and what it's like to be inside the center. Another thing I strongly recommend is people read our posting and look and see what it is we're looking for, and also what you're going to be doing day to day, your tasks. Another really important thing is to do a self-assessment. Ask yourself, is this really what you want to do? What is the reason that you're applying? Is it just because you want a government job, or is it because you really do want to do the work of a correctional officer? Values. Look at the BC Public Service values, which are the same corrections values, and ask yourself, do I have these same values? Do I share in the values that the organization has? I just can't stress enough that people call us, talk to us. Recruiters we're out there, we're very experienced. We've worked in all the centers. We've done the positions for many years, some of us. We know exactly what the job entails. So talk to us, reach out to a recruiter and ask us questions, or just ask us what we do daily, and really get to know what you're getting into. Because the worst thing is someone applies, goes through the entire long, expensive process, gets to the point where they start their training, they go into a center and they go, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? And then it's just a waste of everyone's time, right? So really know what you're getting into before you apply, before you start the process.
Great. Thank you for that, Renee. And that actually does kind of fall in line a little bit with what Natalie was saying about the importance of doing kind of a self-analysis, right? To increase your self-awareness, to really understand what it is you want, what it is you can do, where are your limitations, right? And so forth. So thank you very much for that. Okay, Rod, next up, over to you. We often see how companies place a lot of value on soft skills, speaking of McDonald's and all those incredible skills. What would you say are the top 3 soft skills required for someone interested in a career in BC Corrections?
Excellent. Sort of step on that background. I too started work in a fast food industry. It wasn't McDonald's; it was a competitor. But again, I gained a lot of skills at a very young age that probably still stick with me today. I think the number one soft skill that we really look for in our applicants, or to be a good correctional officer, are those communication skills and interpersonal skills. The thing about the job that we do is that we're dealing with human emotion, and we're dealing with human nature and humans. And there's no roadmap, there's no blueprint on how to deal with human behavior, because it's always different. So in the work that we do, because again, we do deal with vulnerable adults, we do deal with a lot of people with limited education levels, that their communication skills and interpersonal skills might not be there. So ours need to be, so that we can deal with them effectively. A lot of times when there are issues around the work that we do, a lot of times it is due to poor communication. So we really look for those communication skills in our applicants. And again, those communication skills come from such a wide variety of jobs out there, as I talked to earlier, in terms of the service industry, in terms of retail, where you're dealing with people and having to resolve conflict. So sort of like I say, that to us, that number one skill, soft skill that we're looking for, are those good communication skills. Because again, things can go sideways very quickly if you have poor communication. And again, good listening being another one. I would think another one that we look for are sort of those good problem solving skills and those conflict resolution skills. So again, and part of that comes from confidence. So if you're confident within yourself, to sort of put out these small fires before they become big fires. And I know Renee would echo that. It happens a lot that, a lot of times that if you don't have these skills, something that was very small and could have been doused and put out right away can sometimes turn into something very big. And again, dealing with vulnerable adults, sometimes this can happen quite quickly. So having that ability and confidence to be able to to put these fires out quickly is a huge asset and a great skill to have while working inside. And the other one would sort of be that patience and understanding, having that ability to, with some patience, because again, we are dealing with the vulnerable sector. And again, as I said earlier, sort of human nature and humans in general, where there is no roadmap and no blueprint, and there's no exact way to do it, because we are all different. Having that patience, that understanding, and sort of some empathy into the situation that you're in really goes a long way in order and making sure that your shift and your career goes well. But again, it also is going to help your peer. So somebody that's coming in behind you, that if your shift went well, all likely that theirs might go well as well. So those are sort of just a few of the soft skills that we're sort of looking at. But I would say front and foremost for us is those good communication skills, because that's really what we have. When you're sitting on a unit with the offenders, that's sort of what we have at our disposal. That's what we use, to make sure that we get home safe that day, and to make sure that everybody is safe that's in our custody.
Right. So those are your tools. Yeah, those are your tools in your tool belt. Yeah, for sure.
Most definitely.
Yeah, and certainly kind of echoing what Renee had mentioned a little earlier on with her own response, for sure, is all those the incredible importance of those soft skills or transferable skills. And certainly when you're working with that kind of vulnerable population, I mean, we see the importance of de-escalating communication skills in a standard workplace, in a family with young children. But when you're working with a vulnerable population, that can certainly set a tone, I would think, for either a very productive shift or a very, very tough one.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, I would see that for sure. Rod, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move over to the group panel question. Now, I see that it's 12:50. We're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great, but I do know that Binita is having to leave at 1 o'clock. So I'm wondering if we can, this question is for all panelists, but I'm wondering if, Binita, if we can ask you to answer this one first. So this is we're looking for full disclosure here from all panelists. It's a two-parter. What is your least favorite, let's be honest, what is your least favorite thing about your job? And what is the best thing about your job? So Binita, can we steal a few minutes from you before you head out?
My apologies. This is not Binita. It's Michelle from the Career Center. Unfortunately, it looks like Constable Binita has already left, and we might have to skip her part.
Okay, thank you for that, Michelle. Yeah, I can't see any of the panelists, only the ones that speak. So, okay, no worries. We can go ahead and why don't we take it over to Renee? Renee, why don't we get started with you? What is your least favorite thing about your job, and what is the best thing about your job?
Okay, so the least favorite thing about my job is a little bit about myself. I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I like to, and I try to do my best at everything. That's just who I am. So for me, my least favorite thing is when I can't control a situation in the way that I want to control the situation. So like Rod said, we do deal with a vulnerable population, people that don't have coping skills at all. So I'm patient, I can spend 2 hours with someone and talk to them and reason with them and get them to do what I need them to do. So when it comes to the point where there's no way I can get that person to comply to do what they need to do for their safety, for everyone's safety, and the situation has to go a different way, whether it's calling the ERT team, which fortunately we don't have to use a lot, but there's times when that may happen. And so for me, the worst part is that I kind of feel like a failure because I wasn't able to deal with that situation the way that I wanted to deal with it, and it had to go a different route. That's definitely my least favorite part.
Yes, because human beings are complex, aren't they? Yes, absolutely. And sometimes they're just, it's out of our control. It's out of our control. Now, you mentioned the ERT. Can you expand on what that means?
Yeah, so we have an emergency response team, similar to what the police have, but, well, a little similar to what the police have. And Mr. Johnston, he was on the team for many years, so he knows better than I do of how it works. But I do know when it comes down to it and it's their safety that's at issue. We are responsible in corrections as officers to keep everyone safe and secure. So we need to do whatever we can to make sure that person doesn't hurt themselves or hurt others. So there's times where we do need to call in some more specially trained staff. ERT members are trained staff, that correctional officers that work at our center, and they just have extra training. So they're able to control the situation differently than the way I'm able to control it. And usually all it takes is for them to come in there suited up and use their voice in a loud way, and the person complies. Most times it doesn't even have to get to anything physical at all. It's just the presence of that team has the person complying. So
Right. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And the second part of that question, Renee, is what is the best thing about your job?
Hands down, the best part of my job is the people I work with. The staff, it's the camaraderie, the teamwork. It's like a family, and we all are going through the same things. We go through the same situations, things that we go through that the general public doesn't have to see or go through. So you don't really have anybody to understand situations that you've had to deal with and how they may affect you. So having those coworkers that know what you're going through and can share in that is really important. It forms bonds as well that way, right? And also the fact that if I have somebody that maybe I don't get along the greatest with, which doesn't happen because I love everybody, but if you do have somebody that you don't really get along great with, and a situation happens, and that person will be there and have your back. So it's really about that whole camaraderie and just how the team is so strong together. And we also have a really good sense of humor. Sometimes it's a dark sense of humor, but we have a sense of humor which you really need to have in this job, because you're going to have times where you're either going to laugh or you're going to cry, and it's just so much healthier to be able to laugh with each other. So it's the people that's my favorite part.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, I suspect that dark sense of humor comes as a bit of a coping strategy sometimes for what can, be an intense situation. And then also we do use the term, oh, I love my coworkers, they have my back, but they literally in your role have to have your back, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's not just a saying, it's a thing. It's like you live by it. You live by that.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Renee, for taking that question. And why don't we move over to Natalie? Natalie, full disclosure for this one. What is your least favorite thing about your job, and what is the best thing about your job?
Well, the least favorite thing about my job, other than sometimes I have to read like kind of boring budgeting documents about finances, is when I don't have enough resources to accomplish all of the fun and exciting things that we want to accomplish. And so we have to make hard choices about what gets cut off at the bottom of the priority list. That's pretty hard, because if something has made it onto the list of things that are government priorities to take forward to the legislature, it's usually because they're pretty interesting or important, or they advance access to justice in some way. And so having to take things off the list because we don't have the resources, the people power to do it, is rough. But definitely my least favorite. But the best thing about my job is just the absolute rush that we get when we got 6 or more legislative projects all crashing towards the legislative session at the same time, and there's paper flying everywhere and tons of approvals needed, and things are going hot rush basis up to the minister's office, and maybe sometimes we get a little bit of direction to change something and it comes back down and we have to tweak it, and then we get to go to the legislature and support the minister in the House during the debate. It is really fun and exciting. And then at the end of the session, as each of our items gets approved by the legislature and gets royal assent, it's awesome. It's like playoffs. I love that part.
Wow, to be a change maker. A change
Yeah.
maker, right? Yeah, absolutely. How fantastic is that? That's
Yeah.
a pretty good best thing about your job, I would say.
Yeah.
All right. And then finally, why don't we head over to Rod? Rod, looking for your least favorite thing about your job and the best thing about your job. And you can't
So-
copy Renee's answer.
Well, I try not to, but again, for me, I don't know that I really have a lead, because I really do enjoy my job. And if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't be here for 33 years. However, there are parts of my job that are very challenging. And as much as I don't want to echo what Renee said, but it really is sort of having to deal with that human nature and having to have plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I sort of at the ready to go, because there are, people that we deal with that are difficult to deal with. And as much as you try everything that you can to try to come out with an outcome, sometimes it's just enough. So again, for myself, I find that very challenging to have all this at the go. So that's sort of, for me, it's not, like I said, it's not that there's a least favorite part of my job, but there are some very challenging part of my job that I have to deal with. Unfortunately, I didn't want to echo what Renee said, but you asked her first. Now, do you want to talk about the best parts of my job?
Yeah, that's okay. But yes, please do. But I was also thinking there must be, when there's any type of incident that happens, there must be an incredible amount of paperwork involved. Is that not one of your least favorite things?
I guess I could say at one time I was a scheduler. So trying to balance overtime versus non-overtime, that was again not necessarily the least favorite, but again very, very challenging, because again you're dealing with human nature and you're dealing with staff and that have other priorities and this and that. So but it was part of what I did. But again, very challenging. Paperwork, I never, like I say, I didn't mind the paperwork too much. So like I said, it was part of my job, and that's, if you ask Renee, she'll tell you that that's what I get paid to do.
Yeah. Okay. What about the best thing about your job?
So the best part again is obviously the people that I work with are fantastic. We really are a big family here. Like any big family, there's going to be people that you don't necessarily get along with. However, when push comes to shove, every one of those family members are going to be behind us. But another part of my job that I really enjoyed is recognition when it isn't asked for. And I'm talking more from the offenders than your peers. So there have been times where I've dealt with offenders. So again, over 33 years, I've got relationships with a lot of offenders that I've seen, day in, day out, or over 33 years that come in and out. So you do build these sort of relationships with them. And I remember one time where I had an issue with one that almost went sideways. However, 2.5 years later, he came into custody and apologized to me and thanked me. So again, it was unsolicited, but those are really the nice parts of our jobs. And it happens more often than people think that we get letters that come in and thanking the staff. Letters will come into the wardens thanking the staff for the work that they did. So that is sort of a nice part of the job, with all the bad parts that possibly can happen in the work we do. It's nice to know that we do make a difference. And I think every one of our staff do everything they can to make a difference every day that they're at work. So those are sort of the nice parts of the job.
Well, that's great. I have to say, I am quite surprised. I suspect there's probably some other attendees today that are surprised that the corrections officers have received thank you letters and obviously verbal thank yous as well. I have to say, I'm a little bit surprised by that. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's so fantastic to hear. Okay, great.
It sort of reaffirms what we're doing here in BC Corrections.
Absolutely, it would. Yeah.
Um,
Great. Thank you for that, Rod.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I wanted to we're going to move into a question and answer component next, where any of the attendees today can ask any of the panelists questions. But I wanted to kind of finish off before we go into the question and answer segment. I wanted to finish off with this quote. Now, this quote comes to us from Anthony Cruz, who's a criminology student, and he is also taking a taking the co-op program. So this is a quote directly from Anthony. While I yearn for my career in law enforcement, working with communities and being in front lines of poverty has surprised me through the passion and respect I have for all social workers and those in the field. My time at the Salvation Army has humbled me and has given me memorable experiences, good, bad, and ugly. I think someone used that term today. I think that was you, Rod, that I could not find elsewhere. My next and last term will be here, continuing to help those in need, and will continue to grant me the experience of being in the front lines of poverty, community, and homelessness to aid my aspirations of being in law enforcement. I just thought that was a really, really great quote from co-op student Anthony, who's majoring in criminology. So, Anthony, if you happen to be listening, thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to open it up for Q&A here. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that I can kind of be a part of this. Here we go. All right. So, Michelle, do you happen to see if there are any questions that came in through the chat?
Yes, I do. Before anything, I saw the question here from Chinny about email addresses. I also do want to open up to our panelists if you would be if it would be all right if you share your contact information if there's our students who would like to have who has some follow-up questions as well.
Sure.
Awesome. And we
Yeah.
will only share it if we do get the request from the student.
Yep.
So for Jesse here, what kinds of careers are available in the criminology field straight out of college or university? And I think this could be a question for all the panelists.
So yeah,
Rod,
there's
sorry, yeah.
yeah, there's certainly a career with corrections that you can start with a criminology background. Our basic requirements are basically 19 years of age, high school graduation or equivalent. We have an English language requirement that you must meet. You must have a Class 5 driver's license and an occupational first aid level 1, which is a 1-day, 8-hour course. And you must be a Canadian citizen, landed immigrant, or permanent resident. So those are sort of our basic requirements. That'll sort of start your career. The thing about corrections is once you start your career, there's many ways that it can go. So it's not like you're going to start and you're going to be working on a unit and dealing with offenders. There's so many different areas. There's some control center areas where you're sort of dealing with technology and security part of the buildings. There's what we call our line staff or correctional officers, which are sort of the backbone of what we do, where you're working on the units, dealing with the offenders on a day-to-day basis, answering questions, providing some case management, that sort of thing. We have a programs department which offers a multitude of programs to our offenders. The really interesting thing about the programs that we offer, almost all of them are taught by correctional officers. So it's not like there are some programs where we do have people that come in, AANA, M2, W2, EFRI, John Howard, stuff like that. But we have a lot of programs that are specific to some criminogenic factors that we address, and they're almost all taught by correctional officers, and they're taught by correctional officers that sort of put their hand up to do it. It's not like, I'm told that, Rod, you're going to be teaching this course. Everybody that's teaching it, they're teaching these courses because they wish to teach the courses. So, and then from there, once you get into government, it's really the world opens right up. There's some postings within government that are called internal postings that you can only apply to as a BC government worker, right? So from there you can go, from custody, which is what we are, to possibly community, which is our probation officers, parole officers. So it's sort of getting your foot in the door, and then the career becomes whatever you wish your career to be. Wherever you want to take it within government, it really becomes up to you.
Thank you for that, Rod. Actually, I have a question for Natalie. Natalie, does your department or within that ministry itself have internship? Do they ever host internships or co-op students or anything like that?
We sure do. So we sort of have two streams. So we have law co-op students. So these are students from the University of Victoria Law Faculty who come and spend 4 months with us in our division, working on policy and legislation. And they do that so while they're in law school. And then the second stream is that we also take on articling students, which are people who have graduated from law school but are not lawyers yet. And they can come and work in our office for any period of time from 4 to 8 weeks as part of a 1-year articling period where they article all around the BC government. So we do have those opportunities. I wanted to say that a connection between the work on Rod and Renee's side and my side is that folks come from all kinds of operational areas into policy. and work their way up in policy positions, up into our policy and legislation shops. So there's lots of different options on both operational and policy side.
That's really great to know. Yeah, because Natalie, we heard of your background, which is law, and that kind of streamed you into where you are now. And I'm just wondering if you can think of any departments within the BC government itself that might be, if again, if I'm making the assumption that we have primarily criminology students here. Are there any particular departments or roles that you can think of that criminology students, maybe fresh out of university, might be qualified for?
Yeah, so the job that you would want to be looking for would be called a policy analyst or a program analyst. Those are tend to be the not quite entry level, but the post-university level work positions that you can then work your way up in policy and legislation. So my position is a little bit unique. I'm probably one of the only executive directors in government who's actually required to be a lawyer. Most of our executive directors of policy in government work their way up. So they started out as policy analysts and worked their way up into ED positions, ADM, Assistant Deputy Minister, and so on. People who, and in the meantime, they'll go back and get a master's degree in public administration, for instance, and government offers scholarships for their employees in order to advance their education as well. So my position requires me to be a lawyer because I supervise lawyers who do policy work, but that's only because it's in the Ministry of Attorney General. Other ministries don't necessarily have lawyers doing that work.
Great, thank you for that, Natalie. And just speaking of government at the municipal level, I did happen to see a posting just today for a crime analyst with the City of North Vancouver. So hey, there you go. Michelle, I'll take it over to you to see if we have any more questions in the chat.
Sure thing. Yes, I do have a few questions here. Hannah is asking about the qualifications required to join RCMP. Hannah, unfortunately, Constable Cieslar has to leave early today, but if you email me, and for everyone else, if you email careers, again, I'll add it here, careers@kpu.ca, I can help facilitate that connection with whoever it is that you would want to connect with. And then for the next question here, I have your KPU alumni, Chini. Chini says she has certificate in crim, but not in a correctional field. But I'm working in the federal government. Is it possible to work not just in the correctional area, but other area as well when you finish your crim studies? I think the question is kind of like, Chini, can you clarify if you're specifically asking for like other areas or other positions within the correctional facilities or other position in general? And while I'm waiting for that question, I have your question from Mancha. What are some common misconceptions about criminology, either from television shows or true crime books or documentaries? I think this could be a very interesting answer that we can get. Rod,
Oh,
Renee,
before we get to Manchas, I do see that
yeah.
Chinny had said
Oh,
that's actually, it wasn't a question, a statement. Yep.
Oh,
Just, yeah, making a statement. Yeah.
awesome. No, thanks
Yeah.
for clarifying, Chinny.
Yeah. Chinny wrote, I'm stating the fact that it is possible to work in the federal government to work not. I'm stating that the fact that it's possible to work in the federal government to work not in the correctional field when you finish your crim studies. So yes, there's definitely a variety of pathways that you can go, I think is what Chinny's point is. Okay, sorry. So to go back to Mancha, I'll leave that over to you, Michelle.
For sure, thank you. But yeah, I have here the question, what are some common misconceptions about criminology, either through television or books or documentaries? Renee, Rod, Natalie, is this something that you can share with the students?
You answer there, Renee?
I'm kind of confused by the question. Criminology, meaning the things that happen inside that people don't see. Is that what the question is?
Yes, I think maybe in terms of like criminology position or like fields, like area, like correction officer, RCMP, or maybe working in law enforcement. What are the common misconceptions that I guess students will have that are shown in television and documentaries?
Well, I can say for sure a lot of the TV shows and movies out there depict our centers anyway, a correctional facility, in a very, very different way. If you can think of more of a therapeutic environment as opposed to ones you see on TV where it's bars and it's cement and people are kept in those cells. They call them cells. We actually call ours rooms. But you know, that type of a thing that you see is so different than what actually happens inside of a correctional facility. Like Mr. Johnston was saying, we have programs. So they have rooms. There's lots of time out, like nobody is locked up and throw away the key kind of thing. There's communication, there's supports, there's everything from healthcare to psychological support to nursing and substance abuse nurses and medical care, and it's very, very, very different than what you see when you're watching like Shawshank Redemption or something like that, you know, where you'll see it's nothing like that at all. It's very, very, very different. Mr. Johnston, do you want to add anything?
No, I would echo that, you know, when I started, it was very much the cells and bars is sort of what I started. If anybody's ever been to Alcatraz, it looked exactly the same, the lock, all of that stuff. And we very quickly changed from there to more of a dorm type setting, right? So where you're going to be, our officers are on the units, and the cells are sort of, or rooms are out in front of you, and they're unlocked during the day, and when they're unlocked, they're doing programs. So it's, you know, we try to make it more like everyday living. So, you know, when you get up, just like at home, when you get up and you have your shower or whatever, and you make your bed, and then you go down and have breakfast, and then you sort of do your daily chores or whatnot, and then you might have lunch, and then you may go take a nap. And well, it's very much the same with what we do, where, you know, sort of the movies and Hollywood sort of sensationalize it. It's this sort of rough, dark, gloomy type of environment. And here in Canada is not like that. I can't speak for the States. Down in the States is much different because we're dealing with much different numbers. At what time, when I was instructor, we used to talk about LA County Lockup, which is sort of a remand center. You know, they had more people going to court every day than we had in custody in all of BC at one time, right? So when you're dealing with large numbers like that, it's really hard to look at the programming side of it, because you got 10, 15,000 offenders. Here, like I say, our numbers aren't like that, and we really stress the programming, and we try to address those criminogenic factors, figure out why they keep coming into our custody, so that we can address it so they don't come back into our custody. So that's sort of where we do that. Those are sort of the myths, that is that, you know, that we just sort of lock them up, throw away the key. Not at all reality.
And Natalie, just within this same question, is there a show or movie that comes to mind that is, you know, that kind of tries to mirror what you do within the ministry?
I don't think anybody's made a show about policy yet, which is very disappointing. Although actually, some of those real like political shows sometimes get kind of close to the mark, actually, on some of the stuff that I do. There's a really interesting show out of Denmark called I think it's called Borgen. It's about the Danish Prime Minister. Yeah, female prime minister, is really, really good. And I mean, it's not realistic, but there's some discussion of policy in there and legislation. But you know, I practiced law as a litigator in the courts of BC for a decade before in my career, and It is definitely not like the Lincoln lawyer. You don't get a court date within 3 days. You don't get a, immediate verdicts and all that kind of stuff. It's entertainment is entertainment.
That sounds fair. Um, I do have another question here from Ashveen, and I think this is for Natalie. Would a policy analyst or program analyst be a good stepping stone for someone who has obtained a criminology minor?
Yeah, so that is definitely, if somebody is interested in making a career in policy and legislation, the policy analyst or program analyst positions are definitely the stepping stone forward. And we have people in those positions in every part of government who have every kind of possible educational background you can think of, from medicine to engineering, forestry, geothermal, and then also the folks like me who are kind of policy nerds, in a kind of black letter law way, people who are interested in trust law, people who are interested in wills and estates. And so really, it's not quite an entry level position because it does require university education at a minimum, but it certainly is a stepping stone for anybody who has an interest in the areas that government addresses, which is everything from housing to cutting down trees.
That's wonderful, Natalie. I do have another question. I think it's and also directed to you again, from Kodiak Chung. Um, Kodiak wanted to know, as someone who has a learning disability and is soon finishing his final year majoring in criminology, if you have any suggestions on how to succeed in transitioning from studying as an undergraduate to studying to complete a law degree with a learning disability.
I can't speak specifically to learning disability, but I can sort of talk about generally about law school with a disability and my experiences. So I think that the biggest thing for me was being honest with myself about what my abilities were and about where I wanted to put my energy. So I wanted to make sure that I'm putting all of my time and my mental energy and my physical energy into the most high value activities. So the things that are going to get me where I want to be and they're going to help me be successful. So when I was in law school, that meant, I spent all of my time focusing on my studies. I didn't have a part-time job. I worked during the summers, but not during school. And I also relied on my fellow students with disabilities. It was, in the case of a physical disability, it was kind of easy to spot each other. So we were able to kind of connect and say, hey, like we have something in common. And we definitely supported each other through law school. I'm sure things have changed so much since I was in law school, Kodiak. I'm sure that people are a lot more open now about learning disabilities and mental health and all of those kind of hidden disabilities. I would encourage you to reach out to the Disability Student Association at a law school and see if you can get connected. They may be having summer events to welcome students. That's a thing that was happened when I was in law school. Like we got together in August. Before law school started. So I'm hopeful that you can find your community and just be honest with yourself about what it is that you want to accomplish and putting your efforts into the most high value activities.
That's really great, Natalie. And yeah, just in pulling on that string a little bit, Kodiak, yeah, early access to the accessibility services, to the Disability Student Association, like Natalie mentioned, the Learning Center or learning services, access them early on, and then see if there's any way that you can connect with like-minded students early on, like Natalie suggested as well. Great tips, Natalie.
Thank you. Those are wonderful share, Natalie and Chantal. I do have. Oh, it looks like I have no questions, but Kodiak says thank you, and thank you as well, Kodiak, for that question. If there's any other questions from the students that are still here, please feel free to do so. We still have 5 more minutes at least to answer your question. If not, then I guess we can do some closing remarks. Oh, I see a hand up. Anuja, if you want, you can turn on your camera and unmute yourself, and you can ask your question.
Hi, I had a question in general. Right now, I'm doing a diploma in criminology at KPU. So I'm an international student. So I wanted to know, like, is there any limitations for getting into having a career with RCMP or CBSA with a diploma, or should I need a degree for that?
Yeah, so Anuja, I know that one thing that Rod had mentioned for BC Corrections is the status. So Rod, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a Canadian citizen or a PR,
Yeah,
right?
Canadian
Or
citizen, landed immigrant,
landed
or
immigrant.
PR card.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm aware of that. I'm asking, like, I was a lawyer back in India.
mhm.
So if I transfer that credits and if I am able to get my PR in like 2 or 3 years, is there a possibility that I can get into a law enforcement field in Canada?
So I can tell you I can only speak for BC Corrections. Myself and Renee, we hire
Okay.
for BC Corrections. So I can tell you with your PR card, you could get into corrections. I can't speak for CBSA or the
Oh, okay.
RCMP, as their process or requirements are different than ours. But I can
Hmm.
tell you with BC Corrections, once you have your PR card and you meet all the other requirements, then you can get a job with us. I would suggest, so while you're waiting for your PR card, make sure that you get some of your documents evaluated,
Okay.
in terms of proof of high school graduation and whatnot. So that might require that you get your documents from your home country, may
Okay.
need to be evaluated through companies like ICES, WES, IQAS, stuff like that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right. So, and
Is there
basically
a
what
oh, sorry. Is there a minimum or a maximum age requirement
uh, we have
for BC corrections?
a minimum age of 19, and there is no maximum age, as
Oh,
long as, but again, like Renee talked to earlier, do your research, go to our website. We do have a physical abilities test that you need to complete, and we have a video of it on our website, so you can actually look at the video, you look at the physical test, and make sure that you're able. But there is no maximum. Like I say, I know that we've hired gentlemen at some of our centers that were over 60, right? So
oh, okay.
there is no, um, as long as you're 19 years of age and as long as you meet the requirements and you can get through the testing, then
Oh,
then
okay.
then you can apply.
I had one more question. Like, in order to get into BC corrections in the long run, which volunteer opportunity would you recommend?
Um, Anything where you're having to learn those interpersonal skills and those communication skills. Dealing with people, vulnerable adults, working on the downtown east side,
Oh,
working
yeah.
for Salvation, volunteering with Salvation Army, um, depending where you live, Surrey Crime Prevention Society
Okay.
is a good place to volunteer. Because like I say, they do a lot of different stuff. And again, you get those opportunities to deal with people. You get those opportunities to work as a team, um, and sort of gives you an idea of sort of the work that we do. So anything where you're dealing with people and sort of, and as well as sort of vulnerable people, that you're going to develop those skills, those soft skills that we talked about.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anuja, I just wanted to mention briefly, you can definitely hop over to the Border Services Agency website and RCMP. They will have it very clearly listed what their minimum requirements are. So have a look over
Yeah,
there.
sure.
I do want to be cognizant of the time and respectful of our panelists. We're just approaching 1:30. If it's okay with the panelists, we might look at taking one more question, if that's okay with all of you. But certainly, if you
Chantal, I popped an answer into the chat for Ashvin's question because I thought it was a great question, but I really do have to go to a 1:30 meeting. So I popped the answer in there, and if anybody wants to chat, please feel free to give out my email address. Thanks.
Excellent. Perfect. So
Natalie.
yes, have a look at the chat there. Natalie, thank you so much for your time today. It was very invaluable.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Okay, Rod and Renee, do you have time to answer one more question?
We do. Can I just say one thing to the students that are listening? This is something that Mr. Rod and I see a lot of, and that is students cheating on their exams. The decisions you make now are going to affect you later on in the career you're looking for. And one of our questions we ask is, in the last 15 years, have you ever cheated on an exam? So please, and you would not believe how many we get that say yes to that question. So the students that are listening, please, please, please think about your actions now, because they are going to affect your job opportunities in the future. Thank you.
So incredibly important, Renee. Oh no.
It is.
Wowza. Wowza. Okay. Wow, that's really important information there. Okay, Michelle, I'll just pass it over to you. Maybe we can grab one more question out of the chat before we let Rod and Renee go.
For sure. Actually, I believe that is the last question, my dear. So it looks like we have finished all the questions that we have in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Well, then this is where I say thank you from the Career Development Center, from all of the students here, Renee and Rod, and of course, Natalie and Binita. It was so incredibly invaluable to have you here today and for you to share your knowledge and experience and insider tips and so forth, especially that last one, Renee, that's a kicker. That's a kicker. So thank you all very much. And to the students and everyone that's attending today, thank you so much for giving us your time, giving us your lunch hour. We hope to see you for the next industry panel session. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye.